Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we wrap up our ABCs of Nintendo DS real quick so we can take the Nintendogs for a walk. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going great. I had a cold about like 2 weeks ago, and it turned into just congestion for the longest time.
Yes.
And now it's moved from nasal congestion to just like sitting in my throat.
Uh-huh.
And I'm telling you this because if like while we're recording, if you're talking or I'm like I clear my throat suddenly, it's not because I have any like grand pronouncements about the heir to my estate.
Right. It's not a Dolores Umbridge interruption to correct me on my behavior.
That's right.
And make me carve a message in my hand that I will not tell wicked lies or whatever.
Exactly.
Is that what happened in that book?
That sounds right.
Okay. Okay, so you've got some throat congestion.
Yeah, some throat congestion.
What are you doing to how do you treat this sort of thing in your life? Should I have offered you tea earlier?
No, you know what? I've just given up on trying to do anything about it, except just warn people that hey, this is a part of me now.
But that can't be true. It has to get better.
Does it? What about those people that get hiccups for like 30 years? I was gonna say a million years,
but no one lives that long.
That's just too much. That's hyperbole. But 30 years.
30 years. Okay,
that's possible.
That's possible.
Yeah.
But it's not. I mean, first of all, if you had hiccups for 30 years, we'd have to stop doing this show.
We would.
I will not edit 30 years of hiccups out of the show.
Patrick drawing a line.
Yeah, it's where
it's fair.
No,
that's fair.
Look, if you want to take over the editing of the podcast,
no.
Because we currently do almost nothing.
This is a promise.
Yeah.
If I get hiccups for 30 years, I'll just withdraw from the show.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I understand. Yeah, you'll bow out. It'll be a resignation.
Exactly.
And not, I won't have to fire you
but
from the show.
I will. And in that case, it might be me clearing my throat to make that announcement, and not just because I also see that would be the worst.
See,
if I have 30 years,
now I'm on edge because I don't know if the throat clearing.
No, but you will know because I don't have hiccups.
I see.
Today.
Right in this moment.
Yeah.
It could still happen.
Chekhov's hiccups.
That's right. They've been mentioned. Put it on the board. It's something we got to track for the remainder of the year. Mark gets hiccups, and maybe the beginning of 30-year hiccups, at which point he will resign from the show. If you don't want Mark to resign from the show, you can go to patreon.com/Nintendo Cartridge Society, where you can support us at the 8-bit, 16-bit, or the 4-bit level. If you are at the 8-bit or 16-bit level, you get access to our once-a-month episodes of miniseries that we put out there. We are about to record our episode of NCS Arcade about The Legend of Zelda, The Minish Cap.
Yeah, super excited for this. And if you have any thoughts that you want to be included in that episode, feel free to shoot us an email.
Yep, email us at nintendocartridgesociety@gmail.com. It's great to talk about the game and any games that we're playing or talking about on the show in our Discord. But if you want us to include any of those impressions in the episode, please email us because it is easier for us to compile them and kind of easier for you to express, I think, full and complete thoughts. But conversation is great, so if you would like to get in on some of that in our Discord, please email us at nintendocartridgesociety@gmail.com, and I will send you an invitation to the Discord. Lot of activity in the Discord this week as I was trying very hard to secure a pre-order for the Noah and Mio amiibo.
Any update? What do you have a plan?
And not only do I have a plan, I have a pre-order.
Oh, whoa!
Yeah, so I pulled
Hail
it off.
the conquering hero.
Which just we're just doing Aladdin, right?
Oh yeah, I guess we are.
Yeah. What is that otherwise? Is that
I couldn't think if it was like a Looney Tunes, like a Bugs Bunny.
I mean, it's right?
Yeah.
Which is also a Bugs Bunny thing. Duck might be somebody's. A duck might be somebody's.
Oh, yeah,
brother,
you're
right?
right.
That's Daffy Duck.
But is that the actual song, or is that just like lyrics that are put to
I would
an
assume that it's
existing tune?
yes, right. I would assume it is the latter.
Okay.
Lyrics put to an existing tune. Um, uh, we were
All of this is to say you secured a
yes,
pre-order.
I secured a pre-order for these amiibo for characters that I do not know from a game I have not played.
Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
That's right. But it means that I am perfectly on track. Like my goal of buy everything Nintendo puts out this year. Come Friday, I'm 2 for 2.
Yeah. When you first set that goal,
Yeah.
I
I don't like the way you said goal.
well, when you first said that goal, I was like, okay, I mean, this is achievable.
Uh-huh.
But then immediately,
Then it got hard.
Immediately it got hard.
Right away.
So, what a great example of overcoming adversity.
Thank you. Great point. Speaking of overcoming adversity, I do want to plug right here and now that I have a series of Ninja Turtles source books, sort of like encyclopedias for the IDW comic books coming out, being published by IDW, that I am writing. So if that is something that interests you, if you like Ninja Turtles, if you've been interested in the comics but don't know where to start, these source books are going to be a great resource. So go to your local comic book store, pre-order it. Issue 1 comes out February 21st, which it's just a couple weeks away at this point.
Quickly approaching, and I haven't seen anything from it, but just you talking to me about it, I think these are going to be very cool.
That was real. Looks like you guys were having fun up there. Energy.
No, not at all.
No, I'm very excited. I'm very excited about it. And I have sold it to you well, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, Mark, what we have to do today is we have to finish a task that we started last week. Let's conclude our ABCs of Nintendo DS with N through Z. Now, we were talking before we started recording that in our A through M, we had no repeats between us.
Yeah, no overlap.
Usually there's something where you say it and then I am like, that's what my letter here was going to be. But we had none of that last time. Will we this time as we head into the end of the alphabet?
I don't know.
End of the alphabet is more tricky than
It
the
is
beginning of the
hard.
alphabet.
Yes.
Just fewer words start with the letter X. So, like, what are you going to do? Speaking of what are you going to do, would you like to go first here or should I?
Go ahead.
For my N, I am selecting a character who appears in a Nintendo DS game, a villain, Necrodius, who is the final boss of Kirby Mass Attack. Necrodius, who I don't really want to talk about. I want to talk about Kirby Mass Attack. Necrodius is a classic Kirby villain in that he resides in the Necro Nebula, is some sort of eldritch cosmic spirit horror thing, and commands the Skull Gang in a cute little Kirby game.
Uh-huh.
But mostly I just want to talk about Kirby Mass Attack because it is like the Kirby games get weird sometimes, especially when a touchscreen is involved, and they let you do these things where you are sort of indirectly controlling Kirby. This is the game where you have like hundreds of little Kirbys, and you're like putting them into balls and like throwing them around and like flicking them places with the stylus, and sort of like tapping on the bad guys that you want to have Kirby attack, and have to like do different kind of like gestures on the screen to make them attack in certain ways. And it's one of the few examples of the DS successfully pulling off the using the stylus as input in a game, in an action game where the action feels satisfying. Like I can really only think of this. I assume that Ninja Gaiden game was kind of like that, but I guess I don't know. Or at least like had some satisfying touch-based action. And Severed from Drinkbox had some very good touch-based action sequences, but it's a rare quality to achieve.
Yeah, and that made me think of the other, like Mass Attack made me think of like the other Kirby game that I remember it from the Nintendo DS era, which was Canvas Curse,
Ah,
which
yes.
is the one like there was a sequel on the Wii U called Rainbow
Rainbow Curse, I believe. Yeah.
But Canvas Curse,
We played a little Rainbow
we did, right, for
Curse
Kirby
together. Yeah.
Month. Yeah. But Canvas Curse, the input of it is similar to Rainbow Curse is you're drawing the path for Kirby to take,
Right.
including like loops and things like that.
But it's just one Kirby, and what's better than one Kirby but like
No,
a
it's
billion
true.
Kirbys?
Yeah,
And
hands down.
it's so funny. Like the Kirbys will like die off as they like get hit by enemies and stuff. But like you have to make it to the end with like enough Kirbys that this ball of Kirbys sits on like a scale, and like it has to weigh enough for the Kirbys to get through. It's a cool little game, and like I'm sort of bummed that they don't like revisit this type of Kirby game more frequently. Because how long ago was Rainbow Curse at this point? Like almost a decade, right?
Probably, yeah, because the
Yeah.
Switch has been out for
Oh my god.
yeah,
Yes.
7-8 years.
And like that thing has a touch screen. Also, they made mobile games, so like I don't know. I don't understand what Nintendo's doing, but yeah, Necrodius is
Yeah,
my
very good. I like that a lot.
is my N.
My end.
Leader of the Skull Gang.
What was the galaxy that he's from?
He's from the Necro Nebula.
Necronebula.
Yeah.
That's good. My N is New Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, great pull.
Feel like we've got to talk about the new Super Mario Brothers series / game, which I remember when it was announced was seismic.
Yeah, because it was the first new 2D Mario game in since World, right?
World, I guess. What came out? I think I guess 6 golden coins probably.
Sure. Okay.
Came after that, I think, but still, that's over a decade.
Yeah.
With no traditional Mario side-scrolling game on any platform.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
It's a
crazy.
long time. It's a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a brand new Mario game, brand new side scroller. There hadn't been one since the Super Nintendo /
Game
the
Boy.
Game Boy.
Yeah.
It brought a whole new art style.
Mm-hmm.
Love it or hate it, it defined the Mario universe.
That's true.
For like a decade, almost 2 decades, and I still remember that first the trailer they showed where Mario gets the mushroom that makes
Mega
him,
Mushroom.
the Mega Mushroom, and he grows gigantic, and he's just like knocking everything out of the way.
Which is so funny. It's so funny, right? And that like he doesn't just like knock stuff out of the way, he like flattens stuff. There are like mountains that he's just like boom, 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 and they're gone. And like a little meter fills up. Maybe you get like an extra life.
I can't remember.
Like you went from crushing stuff.
But I feel like as a gameplay mechanic, it turned out to not be that fun.
Pointless, yeah.
But it was very like flashy in the trailer. I don't know. Do you know? I think that the music, or at least the main theme for the new Super Mario Brothers series, I kind of like dismissed for the longest time. And then there was this was probably like 5 or 6 years ago. There was an episode of the Super Marcato Brothers video game music podcast, and they do a Nintendo month every year in November. And in one of those episodes, they played the new Super Mario Brothers theme, probably from one of the like newer games, probably from maybe the Wii U version.
Just like the ground theme, the like
yeah, exactly. With like all the different like the detail in it, like the different like sound samples and the way that they all played together, it really made me appreciate it much more when I feel like I had just kind of like dismissed the aesthetics of new Super Mario Brothers for a really long time.
Well, I mean, I do think that the aesthetics overall, both in the soundscape and in like the visually speaking, are meant to be as unobtrusive, as unnoticeable as possible, right? Like the new Super Mario Brothers aesthetic goes down smooth, if unremarkably.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I would say, no worries for not having noticed that music earlier.
But it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. The main theme is really good. So yeah, new Super Mario Brothers.
Great. New Super Mario Brothers, one of 2 games on the DS, 2 Mario games on the DS that had this whole suite of mini games. They're also available in the Mario 64 DS. And I remember playing the heck out of those mini games. Like, loved them. There's the one where you have to like find it's Mario Yoshi, Luigi, and Wario. Those are like the four faces. And it'll tell you like which one you have to find, and then there's just like a screen, and you just like tap that face,
Oh, whoa!
and
I
it just gets
totally
like
remember that.
harder and harder and harder until they're like like they're all there's like hundreds of them like moving around on screen, and like they're like too fast or whatever. Like there's a blinking light. Um, uh, yeah, just like a ton of like little, and that's those things. Like, where are those? Like, put those out again.
Yeah,
Ugh,
that would be fun.
cool, weird stuff.
Yep. On to my O then.
Yes.
So my O is for the Opera web browser, which when the Nintendo DSi
Yes.
released, it natively, just part of its like software, had a web browser. But like the DS was a lifestyle device.
Yeah.
And so they sold a web browser that you bought, like a game card for.
Amazing.
Came in a little case.
Uh-huh.
And it was Opera. It was a version of the Opera web browser, so you could connect with that sweet Nintendo Wi-Fi connection and cruise the World Wide Web.
Yeah. That's incredible. Do you think if they were to why do you think they went with Opera? Like,
well, I don't think it was released by Nintendo.
sure.
Yeah. And so
the Opera was the only company that was like, we should invest in this.
Put it out, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just interesting, like, who do you think if they had to go through the trouble of like releasing a physical product for it, who do you think would go through that now? Like, what web browser would we be using? Safari on our on our Nintendo Switches?
Do you think it would be Microsoft Edge?
Because
of that,
maybe
Microsoft Nintendo connection.
Yeah.
No, okay, so I was incorrect. I just looked it up.
Yeah.
So it was called the Nintendo DS browser is what you would buy. Like the physical thing that you purchased was called the Nintendo DS browser. And it was developed by Opera Software and Nintendo.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was, I think it was published by Nintendo, and it was the Opera web browser running on your Nintendo DS.
So now that's interesting because, a couple years later when the Wii comes out, it has a web browser on it natively.
Right, and so did the Nintendo DSi, which was released after the Wii.
And are those based on the browser like co-developed by Opera and Nintendo?
Let's see. The Nintendo DSi is incompatible with the browser and any memory expansion, but is the free and the Nintendo DSi browser. Looking now,
what an odd...
the Nintendo DSi web browser was a version of the Opera browser.
Oh yeah. And the Nintendo Wii web browser, it's also a version of the Opera browser.
Weird.
Yeah, so Nintendo was just like, here's who we trust for browsing the web on our hardware right now, Opera. Okay. That's a very good O, Mark. My O is I gotta say, also very good. On Tour, Guitar Hero On Tour.
There we go.
Which is an absurd game and set of peripherals. Guitar Hero, of course, all the rage at this point, right? This is like the heyday of Guitar Hero, of Rock Band. And so they were like, let's make sure that people can play these on the machines that are selling more than any of the rest of them, right? That means the DS. Now, to play Guitar Hero On Tour, you have one peripheral that goes into the GBA pack slot that has 3 buttons on it. They could only fit 3 buttons, right? And then the other peripheral that you have is a stylus that is also a guitar pick. So it's like a regular looking guitar pick with like that little plastic nub at the end of it. And then you can play Guitar Hero by strumming the bottom screen with the stylus and then using the 3 buttons to, make chords and stuff.
So were you holding it? Were you holding it like book style? Was it like...
I mean, it's sort of hard to see. You're holding it sideways for sure, but like you gotta...
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
You're like claw gripping it.
Yeah. It's really uncomfortable to hold. And like there's no good place for you to both see it and hold your hand like comfortably. So like you could really only play it for like 10 or 12 minutes at a time before you're like, I gotta put this down. Because also like your other hand has to be so close to it, right? Like it's the like common crack against Guitar Hero is that it's like nothing like playing real guitar, and playing Guitar Hero on tour is like nothing like playing Guitar Hero, so it was just, it's a very funny, bizarre experience. I believe because it had all that like extra hardware in it, it was like an $80 game or something
Oh,
like that.
wow.
And yeah, it's just like just a weird little mess that will hurt your hands.
Oh.
And also, it's not like the speakers in the DS were very good. Like you had to use headphones, and even then was just like not a super positive experience.
While you were describing that, I was trying to think of, is there a way that you could do like a one-person rock band using, because you have the microphone?
Yep, you
for
have the microphone.
singing.
Yeah.
Oh
God, I wish it incorporated singing. That would have been so good.
I guess you could use the bottom. Well, no, because I was gonna say like you could use the bottom touchscreen for the drums, but then you lose.
You
got to
be strumming on it too.
Yeah.
The thing that I do think is really cool about it is that you're actually using a pick to strum the thing, which none of the other the rest of the Guitar Hero guitars and Rock Band guitars all had like a little strum bar, but like you actually used a pick for the 3DS for the DS version. So always thought that was cool.
Yeah, that's fun.
All right, so my P is Picross 3D, baby. Now you may say, hold on a minute, we're not talking about 3DS, and I'll say I know. Picross 3D started on the regular old Nintendo DS.
Ahead of its time.
Ahead of its time, seemingly knew what the future would hold. I've never actually played the versions of Picross 3D on the DS, but I absolutely love this. I mean, I'm a big Picross booster, generally speaking, and I love especially Picross 3D 2 on the 3DS is just a phenomenal version of that game. Impossible to buy now, of course, because the 3DS eShop has closed down. But yeah, what a game. This kind of like doing this research and discovering that there is one on DS made me want to seek out that cartridge. Like I would like to have Picross 3D in my collection so I can play the DS version on my 3DS.
That really is one of the unspoken benefits of, I know there's the DSi shop, but of like the fact that the Nintendo DS did not have an eShop is all of these games that later would just be like eShop releases. And if like I don't know if the Picross games got like physical releases on 3DS,
I think the 3D ones might have.
Okay. But like anything that was released for the Nintendo DS basically outside of DSiWare
exists somewhere.
Yeah, like those carts those game cards exist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, remember last week I was talking about the Game & Watch collections that like have these. I mean, there's the one that has like the bizarre mashup of Parachute and Octopus. If that were released 10 years later, it would have obviously only been a digital download.
Yeah.
But the fact that it had to be released physically means that those things still exist in the world.
I know. I have to confess that this past week I've been just like looking. I've been totally in like a Nintendo DS like memory mood, and so I've been looking at like, should I buy some Nintendo DS cards?
It's a mistake. You don't want to.
I know.
But I think you should do it because I think you'll have a great time.
My P is for pillar, as in third pillar.
Fantastic.
So
yes. We touched on this a little bit last week.
We did, yeah. When the Nintendo DS was first announced by Nintendo, they were in hedging their bets mode because so it was presented as this is not replacing the Game Boy,
right?
This is not replacing a home hardware. This is a third pillar, a whole new vertical that we're exploring,
right? Seemingly saying, don't worry, Pokemon will still come out for Game Boy Advance.
Exactly.
Right?
And if this fails, the Game Boy still exists.
We don't ever have to talk about it again.
Right, exactly. Right. We can Virtual Boy this. We can throw this in the same memory hole as Virtual Boy exists. And
in the same hole that the Wii U would eventually go in.
Right. And so that, of course, turned out to not be the case. The Nintendo DS was incredibly successful and killed the Game Boy line.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking back on it with the benefit of knowing how well the Nintendo DS did, it's interesting to see like Nintendo framing it in a way that they're like, we kind of know that everybody thinks this is crazy.
Yes, that they're like, okay, so we're releasing a new product, and the fact that there is a new product requires explanation, right?
Yeah,
It's and it's so interesting to think that like they were, because for most of Nintendo's time being active in the North America, they've been two pillar, right? They had been two pillar, with the Game Boy coming out in '89. The NES had only been in the States for, I guess, a couple years at that point, but even still, like the NES and Game Boy, and then NES or Super NES and Game Boy, like just made a lot of sense. People got it, right? And it's remarkable that they're like, here's another one. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're that's interesting because you're totally right. Because even later, you had the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance. Like that, it was
Yes.
just for the longest time there was Nintendo's home hardware, and then there was its portable hardware.
Right. And they were both on like sort of separate tracks, and like sometimes the releases would like feed into each other. If in Quest 64 also had a Game Boy Color game, right? Is it Game Boy Color or is it GBA? I think it's Color.
I'm not sure. If it was Quest 64, it was probably Color.
Probably, yeah. And like Conker's Bad Fur Day also had like a Conker like adventure-y game on the on the Game Boy Advance. So like the two platforms like were talking to each other, and then they were like, I don't know, now a third one.
And you also have to remember that at the time Nintendo was on its heels.
Yeah,
yes,
a little bit.
the Game Boy Advance was successful, but it had been out for 3 or 4 years.
And it was no Game Boy, right? Like,
right, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the Game Boy was a phenomenon.
And the GameCube was
not.
A
phenomenon, I think. Then the Game Boy had multiple like phenomenon cycles, right? Like it had its original release with Tetris being huge, and then Pokemon comes along like 8 years later or something, and the whole thing just blows up again. But yeah, so like having the DS come along was like something that there was an injection of excitement that Nintendo needed. It's always so interesting when we do these things looking back on like Nintendo history and trying to like contextualize things, where it's like, there's no like stable time in Nintendo's history, right? Like they are boom and bust. And they're in the middle, like right now in 2024. Are they riding a boom still? Are we on the other side of the boom? Are we gonna head into a bust? Like there's just no way to know.
Right. I guess it's the one way it is encouraging, with the benefit of history, is you're like, well, they'll probably pull through the next bust.
Yes, I agree with that, because they are like a fairly conservative company in that regard. So like they're building their war chest right now, and they can weather some bad years if they have to.
And they seem to find ways to like innovate their way out of hard times.
Yeah. Well, and like right now, when we've talked about it before, but they only have the one gaming pillar right now. They have, I guess, the second pillar in the form of just like entertainment, right?
Right.
The Mario movie, the theme parks, and then everything else that's going to come out in the future.
Yeah,
so.
They're like collaborations with Lego and like all that stuff that they've really leaned into in the past like decade.
Yep. So your P, now your Q.
Yeah, my Q. Okay, so my Q is iQ DS. So iQ is a collaboration with a person, Nintendo's collaboration with a person named Wei Yen to localize products for mainland China.
Okay.
The partnerships started in 2002 and lasted until 2018. And so they released something called the iQ Player, which was kind of like the Nintendo 64 equivalent. But they also released the iQ GBA, the iQ SP, the iQ Micro, which were all like the Game Boy Advance variations. And then they had the IQDS, the IQDS Lite, and the IQDSi. And these, the GBA versions and the DS versions, and they released one 3DS version. The form factor is the same, but then when you like the boot up screen and everything says like the logo is similar, but it says like the two squares, but it says IQDS. And more recently, Nintendo, partnered with Tencent, I think it was.
Yep.
For the Switch, and so like Nintendo hardware is officially available in mainland China. But in around 2003, during that time, the Chinese government had banned imports of video game consoles.
No video games.
Yeah, and so this collaboration was their way to kind of like introduce Nintendo hardware under a different name, but only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Only 6 games were ever released.
What?
Yeah, for the.
Do you have the list of what those 6 games
are?
I
do. So it's Polarium, WarioWare Touched, Yoshi Touch and Go, Super Mario 64 DS, New Super Mario Brothers, and Nintendogs. And then Big Brain Academy was at one time planned, but ended up unreleased. And the releases run a very long time. So it's like there were 2 releases in 2005, and then it's like one in 2006, one in 2007, none in 2008, and 2 in 2009. So definitely, like a very limited library,
really
officially available. I'm sure piracy was kind of like bonkers on it. But just an interesting, the whole like IQ collaboration is just an interesting little fork of Nintendo history. And I had to look up to see if they, because I knew that they had released like Nintendo 64 games, but I didn't realize that they had done all of the
all these
the
other
handheld too.
Yeah, that's nuts. Great cue, Mark. My cue is going to be for Q Games, a developer of many things. They mostly did like the Pixel Junk games prior to the release of their big Nintendo DS game, which is of course Star Fox Command. And I just wanted to shout out Star Fox Command generally here, which is just a bizarre game. Have you ever had the pleasure?
No, I've never played it.
So it is half like bite-sized Star Fox game, right, where you are getting into these combat encounters that are just like small versions of Star Fox levels, sometimes where they're like that sort of open zone, you're like flying around in 360. And so it's half that and half sort of like strategy game where you're drawing the flight paths of your various R-Wings on the bottom screen, and then you like encounter the enemy units down there, and then it becomes that's the Star Fox levels on the top screen. So like kind of cool idea, mostly doesn't work / like isn't like actually fun in practice, but it does do a great job of just like expanding the world of Star Fox in a way that I sort of can't believe other Star Fox games haven't like replicated. There are 14 playable characters in Star Fox Command. You got that's right. I wanted to see if you could name 14 Star Fox characters.
No, there's no way. The brow sweat was already forming.
All right, we got Fox McCloud, Falco Lombardi, Crystal, Slippy Toad, Peppy Hare, Wolf O'Donnell, Panther Caruso, Leon Pawalski, Slippy's fiance Amanda, Peppy's daughter Lucy, Bill Gray, Cat Monroe, Andros's grandson, Dash Bowman, and James McCloud. You could play as James McCloud.
That's amazing. Can we go back to Lucy for a second?
Sure.
Was that her name?
Yeah, Peppy's daughter.
Oh, no. What is Slippy's?
Amanda.
Slippy and Amanda.
I love that, like, in the Star Fox universe, it's like, all right, the men, your names are Slippy and Grippy. The women, you're Amanda.
No, it's true. It's like the old sitcom trope, of like the doofy husband.
Right,
and then
yes.
like Amanda's got it together. In that relationship, Amanda's the one who like knows everything.
Yes. Yep. So Q Games, shouting out Q Games for their absurd work on Star Fox Command.
What I remember about the conversation around Star Fox Command is that I guess maybe that's Q Games. Like Dylan Cuthbert, the Wonderkin, who uh developed or was on the development team of like the FX chip on the
Yeah,
Super Nintendo that made
and made Star Fox. Yeah.
Star Fox possible, that he was like back to work on Star Fox Command.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and it's like it is interesting because there are like pieces of Star Fox Command that you can see in Star Fox 2, like since it's been re-released or like actually released with the Super NES Classic Edition and with the Super NES library on Nintendo Switch Online. That like it's crazy. Like some of those little bite-sized levelly things are in that game that sort of like free roaming. So yeah, it was a little bit like a return to form in that they were like going back to pieces that they had used before and bringing Cuthbert back in the form of Q games. Is just yeah, what a bizarre little artifact.
I did you was did you play Star Fox
Yeah.
Command at all?
Mm-hmm.
Did you Was the microphone used at all?
Ooh, not to my recollection.
Okay.
I mean,
Just
I
with the name like Command. I mean,
Yeah,
I
you
know
would
there's the drawing
right.
part of it. I just wasn't sure if there was like barrel roll.
Well, no, I mean, like I did go, "Gah, gah, bah, gah, bah, 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 bah," and then they did a barrel roll. Mark, for my R has got to be racing, Diddy Kong Racing DS, which is a heartbreaking game for me. I loved the original Diddy Kong Racing on the Nintendo 64. Um, it's just it's got like an overworld, it's got an adventure mode, fun tracks, cool characters, 3 different vehicles that you drive, and like the tracks change basically based on which vehicle you're going through it with. And when it was re-released on DS, I was ecstatic because I was like, great, here's another opportunity for me to play this game and play it on the go. A Nintendo 64 game on the go, that's the promise of the DS right there. But a couple things are different right off the bat. Because Rare is no longer making games for Nintendo, the Rare specific characters that were in the lineup, gone. Banjo, gone. Conker, gone. And they're replaced by Dixie Kong, I believe, and who replaces Banjo? Maybe Tiny Kong? It doesn't matter. Someone else. But the real crime here is that the game, you know how in Mario Kart there's like the little countdown before you go that like dee 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 ba, and you
Yeah.
push the button at the right time to get a little boost off the start line. So there was a mechanic like that in Diddy Kong Racing, which is just normal. You push a button at the right time, you get a little boost. In Diddy Kong Racing DS, there's some way that you had to interact with the novel features of the DS in order to get that boost. So, like with the hovercraft, for example, there's like a little propeller that appears on the bottom screen, and you have to take the stylus and spin it around real fast, spin the propeller on the touch screen to get the boost, and then you got to like throw the stylus so you can like put your hands on the buttons and actually play the game. There's one of them where you have to blow into the microphone to get the boost, and I forget what the third one is, but they're all bad. And like all put you in like a weird physical position that you then have to like get out of in order to actually play the game.
That is weird.
And there was no way to like turn them off or like select the regular
yeah.
boost. It was bad. A bad choice.
Yeah, I did not play a lot of Diddy Kong Racing on the Nintendo 64, and so the DS version just kind of like passed me by. But I remember I guess my I feel like this is like Star Fox Command all over again. But my memory of the conversation is exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
That these small like these changes ended up having like a big impact on the enjoyability of the game.
Yeah, and like I wouldn't have minded if the game was still playable. I wouldn't have minded the character changes. That's all fine. I could have dealt, and also like kind of nice to have Dixie and Tiny Kong in there, like just to have some female characters in the game. But yeah, I mean, just what a garbage fire with those boosts. Really, really, really bad choices.
My R is for redesigns, and this is another one that we touched a little bit on in the first part. But I think, and correct me if you can think of a different instance, but I think the Nintendo DS might be the Nintendo hardware with the most amount of like revisions and re like hardware
I
revisions.
mean, I feel like 3DS might have it beat, um, just because it goes like 3DS, new 3DS, 3DS XL, new 3DS XL. Oh, I guess that's it. That's just those four, right?
Right. And so
DS, DS Lite,
so maybe it's tied because it's DS, DS Lite, DSi,
uh-huh,
and then
and
later like the DSi XL.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I mean, and that's a lot. And like uh with the exception of the I to XL, like they're all huge steps up.
Yeah, they're all just getting like thinner and
Yeah,
thinner.
yeah.
But yeah, the like I mentioned before, the Nintendo DS is the Nintendo system by far that I both bought the most of.
Do you
I
think there's a non-Nintendo system that you bought more of?
No, definitely not.
Right.
It's definitely just the video game
Yeah.
hardware that I purchased because I owned
Like phones
at
maybe.
least at least one version of
Yeah.
every version of Nintendo DS.
Yeah. Yes, very good. Lots of revisions.
My S.
Although if they do another Switch, then that'll also be tied at 4, right? Because we've got original Switch, Lite, and OLED.
OLED.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that does feel very possible.
It
That
does, yeah.
like cuz even like the Wii, which didn't get very many revisions at the end of its life, it got a new version.
Right.
And so I could totally see like in the sunset years the Nintendo Switch, here's like a final redesign.
I mean, maybe it depends on how different the next thing is, right? Like, I think part of the reason that they were like did the Wii revision is that what they were going into next was going to be different, right? Like the Wii U is an HD console with this
Right.
like tablet, and they're like, well, like put out a new thing now that people can continue to play their Wii stuff on, and like sell that again. But yeah, if it's just like if the new Switch is just like more Switch, I don't know why you would bother revising the old Switch.
I guess that's true unless you can make it cheaper
If you can
or
make
like
it cheaper,
better
yeah.
somehow. But yeah, interesting. On to my S.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my S, we got to talk about it. It's the Nintendo DS. It's for second screen.
Oh, yep.
The Nintendo DS had two screens.
I thought for sure you were going to say stylus, which is one of my two choices.
Oh, that's funny. Stylus was my other choice.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do your S, and then we'll do my S, and then we'll talk about the stylus.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah. So the second screen, a surprising, like, I know that the Nintendo Switch has a touch screen, but having two screens,
Yes.
one that is like a touch screen and then one that is just a regular screen, opened up a ton of different game like uses for that second screen.
It's sort of wild, right? Like how much and how varied the approaches are to it. Like what can that second screen be useful for? Which one are you considering the second screen,
Right.
Like that's always exciting to discover where you're like, "Oh, I play most of this game on the bottom screen. Oh, I play most of this game on the top screen." Or when there's like action going between screens is also very cool.
Yeah, and just like this relatively brief time between the DS and the 3DS where, like games like Etrian Odyssey
Yeah.
came to exist, where it's like, yeah, dungeon crawlers existed before, but one where you could map directly on, like the bottom touchscreen.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've tried to work out a way to continue it onto the Switch with the recent like Etrian Odyssey re-releases, but it was like it just makes so much sense for something like that to happen on
totally.
the Nintendo DS. The World Ends With You, like we talked about
Mhm.
last week. Like you said, so varied,
Picross,
so many
yeah.
different things. A completely new control scheme for Zelda games. Like there was so much that could be done with it, or just using it as like a great menu, right? Not having to constantly
Right.
press start to open up the menu. It's there all the time. It totally this was on the 3DS, but it really like opens up the way that it makes playing games like Ocarina of
Ocarina,
Time just so much smoother. And yeah,
And you're not, oh man, the way, and I mean also just Ocarina of Time, you have like all these like different options for like buttons and stuff. And also, yeah, that you can just like use items by like pressing down on the touch screen. Or like New Super Mario Brothers would have this too, where your stored item was just down there and you could just tap it and then it like popped out into the world.
Yep.
That kind of thing is just very. I do feel like we lose a little something going forward in a world without a dual screen experience.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the Wii U was able to capture some of that as well.
Yeah.
But, even when it was just the second screen having a touch screen at the bottom um just really opened up a lot of new avenues for game developers.
I also I just like the idea of the second screen being like part of Nintendo's DNA, right? Like there is the whole series of Game and Watch games that are dual screen. Some of my favorite, like Donkey Kong, like Greenhouse, use the two screens and just to like a cool effect to just have like it just have more screen real estate, which is for whatever reason super appealing and fun. All right. Let's talk about the stylus and then we'll do my ass.
Okay.
Okay. Because the stylus I feel like is in this sort of the same conversation
Yeah.
as the second screen. Because it is, now we have all moved on to a stylus free existence.
Yeah,
right?
like capacitive touch screens.
That's right. We touch with our fingers now and not with little plastic pens. But I feel like you get so much more accuracy with a stylus. Like my finger, it's not particularly fat, but like there's no accuracy there.
Uh-huh.
That's all.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also think back to games like if you're just pressing selecting an item on the bottom screen.
Yeah.
I a lot of times wouldn't pull the stylus out for games that like that's all it requires. But talking about like The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass or something.
Right.
That would not be fun to play, dragging your finger across the screen.
Absolutely.
For hours at a time. Like there were some benefits to being able to use that stylus.
Just like Kirby Mass Attack. Like it's the same thing where it's like you're doing these like slashing and tapping motions, and if you're doing it with your finger, it just feels like you're like thudding or like you're hitting the system. But with a stylus, it feels a little bit more intentional. Although with the stylus, you do end up sort of like nicking up that bottom screen.
You do really bad.
It gets pockmarked pretty bad.
Uh-huh.
But what are you gonna do?
Yep, you hold it under an angle at under like a lamp or something.
Like,
you
oh,
definitely
no.
yep. Yeah, I mean the day of like DS like screen protectors.
Yep.
To try to keep it a little bit nicer.
But then you just ruin the screen protector and like peel that off and the whole thing is ruined. Anyway, my real S, not the stylus S, is I'm not going to talk about this for very long, but Starlo. Starlo is a character, a little pixie sprite-like character from Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. This little character who gets swallowed by Bowser along with Mario and Luigi, and is the thing that actually talks to Bowser from inside and then comes back and talks to Mario and Luigi. So in much the same way that you, the player, are going back and forth between controlling those different sets of characters, so too does Starlo go back and like communicate to both those characters.
I've never played any of those games. I feel like I should.
Maybe. I mean, Superstar Saga is on the Nintendo Switch Online, and both it and Bowser's Inside Story got remakes on the 3DS. And who knows if they will bring any of the rest of them out to, I guess, is Superstar Saga? There was another one that was on Game Boy Advance, right?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't know the series well enough.
Yeah.
Really. But yeah, I mean, they're light RPGs, right? They fall in that like Mario vein, and are fun for what they are. All right, onto my T. This is where I feel like we could start to get into overlap territory. My T is for Tingle's Balloon Fight. Tingle's Balloon Fight, another game that is a Club Nintendo reward, but only in Japan. And again, this is a thing that if it were released 5 years later, would have just been a digital release for sure, because the game is truly just Balloon Fight, except instead of the little dudes in Balloon Fight, you play as Tingle. The box art for this is incredible. Mark, do yourself a favor and look up Tingle's Balloon Fight, the box art, because it is the box art for Balloon Fight, but there's like a little cutout of Tingle that's just like taped on it. And the title of the game, in Japanese, Tingle's Balloon Fight, is just like it appears to be affixed with Scotch tape on the front of the box art. Truly hilarious stuff. And I also love the idea that this was before like virtual consoles and everything like that. So anytime that they trot out a like classic Nintendo game, it's like an event. These things weren't available for a long time on modern hardware. But here's Balloon Fight, and Balloon Fight is a Nintendo sort of classic, I guess, but it's not part of the like hailed gaming canon or anything like that. So like here's a game that you maybe missed when you were a kid and played a lot of NES games, and it's got your favorite Tingle in it, and just looks like a fun, silly Tingle time. And the graphics are all like updated, so the backgrounds aren't just like a static black sky. Yep. Tingle's Balloon Fight is another one that I'm like, should I try to get a copy of this? Oh, were they region free?
The Nintendo DS was region free, I think.
Okay, all right. Well, then I should really try to get this thing.
Yeah, the Nintendo DS was a boom time for Tingle games.
Yes.
In Japan.
Yeah.
There were 1, 2, 3, 4 Tingle things released.
Right. I mean, one of those is the alarm clock, right?
So there's
on the DSi.
Freshly picked. Yeah. That's right. Freshly picked Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land.
An incredible name, by the way.
And I think this one got a European release.
Okay.
But none of these came to America. Tingle's Balloon Fight DS.
Mm-hmm.
Too Much Tingle Pack, which was it includes several applications like a calculator, a little dancing Tingle image, a fortune teller, a timer, and a coin flipping minigame.
It's amazing the things you could sell.
And then Ripen Tingle's Balloon Trip of Love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Darn. Just that we missed out on all of these.
We did. We missed out on every single one. All right, but Mark, I trust then that your T is not Tingle's Balloon Fight.
That's true. It's not Tingle's Balloon Fight. Mine, I feel like we don't need to dwell on that long because we've touched on it in our discussions, most recently of S. But touch, like the fact that the Nintendo DS, the main interface or like the main like innovation was this touchscreen.
Yeah.
Again, one of those things that now we just kind of like take for granted because it's something that all of our smartphones do, but was like a wholly differentiating like selling point for the Nintendo DS. And the fact that it had a touchscreen, again, just like opened up so many avenues for creative gameplay.
It's also not something that the other big gaming companies really took a shot at. I mean, it's the PlayStation Vita had a touch screen, had two touch screens, one in front and one in back. That back touch screen is a problem because it's also not really a screen; it's just like a touch pad. And also you're always like accidentally touching it, activating it. But like there's no part of like the Microsoft controller that has a touch screen. I guess the modern PlayStation controller has like this little like touch pad, but never really utilized in like an active way in the same way that DS, 3DS, and Wii U games did.
Yeah, absolutely. On to my U.
Mm-hmm.
My U is for Underdog. This is another one that I feel
in the same vein as Pillar.
Yeah, I feel like in some ways we have talked about it, but
Under Nintendog?
Huh? Oh yeah, Under Nintendog. Yeah, that's right. I feel like the Nintendo DS, like we talked about a little bit earlier, have to remember that it came at a time when Nintendo seemed like they were about to be like completely knocked out, right? They were kind of like discounted, and with the pending release of the PSP around the same time as the Nintendo DS, it seemed like the Nintendo 64 and original PlayStation battle was about to play out again, where it's like, well, of course the PSP is going to be the most successful of these two pieces of hardware.
And it was an incredibly successful piece of hardware. It's sort of remarkable that both of them were successful, right?
Right. Yeah. But
The market just wanted handheld gaming, I guess.
I think the market just wanted handheld gaming, but I think also like Nintendo, they bet on a different strategy, right?
Yeah, you're right.
They bet on this blue ocean strategy, as I think Iwata was called it, and the idea was like, like focusing on innovation. So instead of trying to compete on technical specs, right? Like they would compete on doing something different,
right,
doing something like unique,
almost like experiential specs. Like,
right.
Here are the things you can experience on our machine that you can't elsewhere.
Exactly. And in doing that, like inviting a different audience to gaming.
Yeah.
And making it like, I think one of the big things with touch, and that we saw with we also saw with the Wii's motion controls, was accessibility, right?
Yeah.
Like so many of the Nintendo DS's software, not necessarily like games, but you interacted with it with the touchscreen, or brain training. You would write things out using the stylus.
Right.
Just like things like that. It was relatively affordable.
Or you would speak to it.
Yeah, that's right. So like they just took a totally different path, and it ended up paying off big time.
A thought just like occurred to me that like, that introducing this like second way, through touch and then through motion controls with the Wii, like that was their way to sort of break down the barrier of like, it's okay if you didn't grow up with games, if like games missed you when you were younger because they didn't exist yet, or didn't exist like in your homes when, for like my parents, for example,
or just became too complicated,
because you have to play a first person shooter with two different thumbsticks at the same time just to move around. And if that is less of a thing now, because more older people who are older now, people like you and I, who are in our, like we're older gentlemen. I'm 41. That I grew up with a controller in my hands. So like, a barrier that you would have to break through 17 years ago, is not a barrier that you would have to break through for someone in my age group right now.
Yeah, totally.
That is a good, what was that, your
U? Yep.
Yeah. For under Nintendo.
Under Nintendo.
Very good. My U is for Akira Ueda. So the U is for his last name, Ueda. He was a designer for Square, and then went on to direct 4 games. Okay, 2 Game Boy games, or 2 GBA games, 1 PlayStation 2 game, and then a quirky little RPG published by a Grasshopper manufacturer called Contact. And Contact is a bizarre game that like sort of, I don't know if it pitched itself or if just like the gaming press was pitching it on its behalf as a sort of like successor to the Mantle of Earthbound, where it was a sort of warped version of like suburban America-ish, as you explore things that happen when aliens are around. And it was a bizarre game that had a like conceit where you took the role of the player who was controlling the character, and so like there's like a doctor on the top screen who would talk to you, the player, and be like, move this dude around, and so you would do that, and it was all very like fourth wall breaking and very much in the vein of the Grasshopper manufacturer, like the Suda 51 style, like mind twisty games, but in the package of like kind of a cute RPG, which I bought and played a lot of and found mostly confounding. Contact is not a friendly game, and it is not a user-friendly game. It's confusing. You'll get stuck. You'll get lost. But it's like a bizarre little experience.
Yeah, I definitely remember it being talked up in gaming magazines at the time.
Well, and like the it's just so strange, right? That like whether people were talking it up or just talking about it. It's sort of hard to tell the difference. I just wanted to Ueda's other games that he directed. He directed two GBA games that were like sequels to the Shining Force games from Sega. So actually published by, so developed by Grasshopper and published by Atlas and Sega. They're called Shining Soul and Shining Soul 2. And then the game that he directed for PlayStation 2 is called Michigan, Report from Hell.
Ouch.
Which looked like it was sort of a like what if Chicago was Silent Hill?
Or like, what if Detroit was Silent
No,
Hill?
because the Michigan here is referring to Lake Michigan, and the game takes place in or outside Chicago.
Okay,
But Michigan, Report from Hell.
I mean, that is a good title.
It's a great title. Look up the box art if you get a chance. It's really, really, really strange. A game I would like to check out. I had never heard of before. Also, it should take place in Michigan because there is a Hell, Michigan.
Huh.
Like that's the name of a city in that state.
Yeah.
Anyway, now my V.
Yep.
My V is for Vibe Island. Are you familiar with Vibe Island?
I'm
Mark?
not.
Vibe Island is the setting of Super Princess Peach,
Oh.
the game where you control Princess Peach. The game got a lot of flack when it came out and sort of in the years since. And like you heard some of it like bubbling up again with the announcement of Princess Peach Showtime, that the this first game where she's the hero is kind of crummy in that all of her powers are emotion based, and having the female protagonist who only has powers because she's manipulating emotion feels bad. But the game doesn't refer to them as emotions or feelings, but as vibes. And now you just got to remember that we're in like 2009 or something like that when this game comes out. And people weren't just throwing around the word vibes.
No, Princess Peach, the original Gen Z.
I think she was. Vibes Island or Vibe Island is it's off the coast of the Mushroom Kingdom, and it's where the whole game takes place. Bowser steals the Vibe Scepter. Princess Peach has a little Vibe gauge that she fills up so she can use her Vibe powers. So I just think like what a trendsetter.
Oh, yep.
We got to give it up to Peach. She was leading the way on Vibe before the rest of us were. And that all happens on Vibe Island.
That's awesome. My V is for Viva Pinata Pocket Paradise. Which is, so Viva Pinata.
I love these end of the alphabet
entries. So Viva Pinata was a Xbox 360 game developed by Rare that originally, like, the germ of the idea started when Rare was still partnered with Nintendo.
Yes.
And then, but you brought up Diddy Kong Racing DS, which was also developed by Rare.
Mm-hmm.
And then Viva Pinata Pocket Paradise was the like last game that Rare developed, like new game that Rare developed for Nintendo hardware. Because at this point they were owned by Microsoft. But the thing that both of those games being brought up, now we see Microsoft having a fairly friendly relationship with Nintendo.
Sure.
Like there's rumors that they are going to release Sea of Thieves or Hi-Fi Rush on Nintendo Switch in the future. They've already released, like the Ori games. Did they? And yeah, and so
both of them.
But it's just interesting that it goes back so long that even in the it's like Nintendo's been playing its own game for so long that Microsoft it's like they are competitors in the same space, kind of, but like that's not really the relationship that they have.
Yeah, that one, the relationship always strikes me as odd. Oh no, I just had a thing and now I don't remember what it was going to be. Well,
if it comes back to you.
If it comes back to me, I'll interrupt either myself or you to interject in here. But yeah, Viva Pinata. What was the gameplay of these?
So Viva Pinata, the at least the Xbox game, the Xbox 360 game, is like it's like a kind of like a gardening game, and so you're
Hmm.
there. You have this space that you are cultivating, and as you grow different plants, or like as you're and you expand, then these animal type things that look like pinatas
Yeah.
will show up on in your garden. And first they show up like in black and white, and then if you do certain tasks, then they get filled in with color.
Yeah.
And then then eventually you could get like a second one of that same type could show up in your garden, and then there's other like tasks for you to do, and if you do those, if you complete those tasks, then they do like a mating dance, and
Oh,
they make like
a
other
pinata
pinatas.
mating dance.
Yeah, and so it's and there's different species and different breeds and like all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, I f- I feel like at the time it was kind of compared to like Animal Crossing, like
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Microsoft's take on like Animal Crossing or something like that. But yeah, that's the gameplay of that series.
I remembered what I wanted to talk about.
Oh, perfect.
And that's well, the relationship between Microsoft and Nintendo does feel like there's no other like, modern parallel for like that specific relationship. It is, can you think of another example of a large development studio like Rare being owned by one of the three console manufacturers and then being sold to another like
Yeah.
changing hands? It doesn't happen.
Well, was Rare ever? It was like part owned by
Yeah,
Nintendo,
that's right.
right?
Yeah.
And that was like the whole thing is they wanted Nintendo to buy them wholesale when
Right.
Nintendo was like, "We pass," and
Right.
so Microsoft picked them up.
It's
But
just
yeah, no, it is very bizarre.
it's a singular
And I wonder if
thing.
that is kind of like if that Rare connection was the seed for them,
It
for
could
the
be.
two companies having a friendlier relationship.
Well, because that's so early in Microsoft's like console. It's the beginning of it, really,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it is. That's wild stuff to think about. Okay, so
I think it's my W.
your W,
And
yes,
my W is for Wi-Fi, is in Nintendo Wi-Fi connection.
yes,
And if you are not old people like Patrick and I,
hmm
then the idea that of a Nintendo console not having Wi-Fi, not having like internet, is probably like foreign and seems silly. But the Nintendo DS was, by this time Xbox Live existed.
right,
PlayStation had some form of online play for the PS2, but really Xbox Live was
yeah,
the standard bearer
right,
for online play. And Nintendo, the GameCube had LAN connection for if you wanted to play Mario Kart Double Dash. Game Boys had connector cables and that sort of thing.
right. But nothing that actually brought them online.
No. And
Right.
so Nintendo Wi-Fi connection was a big deal. And like we talked about in last week's episode, playing Mario Kart DS online was incredible.
Felt like magic. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, it was so early in like the relative age of the internet that a lot of people did not have Wi-Fi connections in their homes.
Right.
And so
No, I remember that. Well, I mean, I was in college at the time, so like I did not have a Wi-Fi router in my dorm room. We just had like the like cables, the outlets, whatever, in each room, and it was like, well, I've got to go to a coffee shop to play this thing online.
yeah, they sold a
Oh
USB
yes.
like dongle
Mm-hmm.
that basically what you would do is you would plug this USB accessory into a USB port on your computer,
Yes.
which were like towers,
Mhm.
they were, and then that would generate a Wi-Fi signal that your Nintendo DS could connect to.
Right.
There were also they had like for a time anyways in the US they had a relationship with like Nintendo, a partnership with Nintendo, not Nintendo, with McDonald's,
Ah, yes.
and to have like Wi-Fi hotspots for your Nintendo DS at like McDonald's restaurants.
Outrageous.
It was a different time.
It was, yeah. It's also just like such a weird throwback to consider like the time when we didn't all have like laptops. And even if you did have a laptop, you went like to the library and were like, okay, where can I hook this up into the internet? Because
Yeah,
because you didn't have
totally.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah, the advent of friend codes right
Yes.
here
Yes.
in the Nintendo DS era with Nintendo Wi-Fi connection.
Nintendo Wi-Fi connection. Also, just like that little sticker thing appearing. It wasn't actually a sticker, but just
But
like a
like
little
the
emblem.
blue
Yes,
logo, yep.
you can picture it so clearly. Nintendo Wi-Fi connection. Very good. Probably better than my W, which is white, which would later be renamed Polar White. We talked about this, I think, in the first episode mostly, but it's the DS Lite launched with this color. Eventually, the coral pink and the onyx colors would come a couple months later. But this polar white was really the like shot across the bow of like Apple to be like, we're doing the cool looking thing that you do. The Nintendo DS is cool now.
Right, when the original Nintendo DS is
Not cool.
not cool
Right.
and did not sell particularly well. It was the Nintendo DS Lite revision like 18 months later in early 2006 that really kicked off Nintendo DS Mania.
Right. And like, the form factor is better, but mostly it just looks cooler.
It looked way cooler. It looked like an Apple device. It looked
Yeah.
like an iPod. Like it was sleek.
And there's like genuinely the first time that you could take a Nintendo handheld like out in public and not be like embarrassed of the thing.
No, that's a really good point.
Right?
Like yeah, because like the original Game Boy, lots of adults played the original Game Boy. That thing is a brick, right? It's
Yeah.
not like stylish. The Game Boy Colors were had their own charm, but I feel like were mostly aimed at kids.
They're
I'm gonna go
toys.
ahead and say,
Yeah, I mean they're brightly colored and yeah.
The original Game Boy Advance, like a big weird purple
Yeah, I know,
batarang.
it's bizarre.
And then the Game Boy Advance SP, like a significant upgrade, but
Right.
still like very toy looking.
Yes.
Yeah, you're totally right. And then the original DS was hideous, but the DS Lite, they really hit on with something there.
They figured it out. Like they made it good. And that's all is launched with that white color. It is weird that when it was launched they just called it white. And then as it went on, they had to like sort of rebrand it. They were like polar white.
Yeah, I didn't remember that. That is
Isn't that weird? My X, Mark, we're on to X now, is for XL, because we talked about like the revisions of the DS, and eventually getting to that DSi XL, which is a big version of the DSi. This is the first time a Nintendo has done revisions on basically all of their handhelds, right? But this is the first time they made a handheld that was bigger than the one before. Everything else is shrinking it down. The Game Boy goes to the Game Boy Pocket. The SP is smaller than the original Game Boy Advance. Like everything,
Then you get the micro,
everything. And
you
the
get
micro,
the-
which is the smallest
the
thing, you're gonna
GBA
accidentally
micro,
swallow it. And even like the DS Lite, obviously smaller. Like we just get smaller, smaller, smaller. The DSi XL was sort of the first admission of like, maybe you want this to be big. Maybe you want to be able to like see what's going on this screen. And that is obviously a trend that has continued in their handhelds going forward. The 3DS obviously had XL models, and well, the Switch OLED version is not physically bigger. The screen is bigger. It takes up more real estate on the front, and the like kind of bezel is gone. But yeah, that's something that it took them, I don't know, 15 years of making handhelds to be like, oh, wait a minute, maybe it'd be nice to have a bigger one.
And not that the DS and really like the 3DS looked all that great in XL, but part of it had to have been like technical limitations. Like, could you imagine
Yes.
a huge Game Boy? That screen would be so bad.
Right, what would be the point? But yeah, it's just it's just funny to think that like there never was a like reason to make.
Yeah.
Like I think there probably would have been a market for like a Game Boy SP, Game Boy Advance SP with a bigger screen, or that was just like a little bit bigger.
Right. Yeah.
Although I guess I'm essentially just describing a DS. Mark, your X.
Yeah, that's a great one. My X is for crossover device.
Ooh.
And when we talked about this Blue Ocean strategy and Nintendo DS being a under Nintendog, there's like one of the big parts of it was reaching new gaming audiences, lapsed gamers, people who were not, like playing video games before. Now everybody plays games. They're on everybody's mobile's phone.
Right.
Like so games are so ubiquitous, but that was not the case when the Nintendo DS came out. So just some interesting stats.
God, the Nintendo DS changed the world.
No, it really did. Like, so in 2006, so not that long after the Nintendo DS had been released, right? 44 Nintendo reported that 44% of DS owners were female. An entire generation of female gamers were born out of the Nintendo DS.
Yes,
because it was the majority of Nintendogs owners were female.
Yeah. Well, because for the first time, here's like a game that's marketed towards that audience.
Yeah, and like a game system that is getting, for whatever reason, it was really just like lightning striking that it was like, oh, there's a ton of these out there, and a lot of the audience, like half the audience for this, are women, and so like we should make software that like appeals to them.
Right. Or at the very least, like isn't alienating
right.
to them.
Yeah, exactly. So 44%.
Everyone else is like Duke Nukem 4.
Make that Marines balder. In 2006, 44% of DS owners were female, according to Nintendo. The majority of Nintendogs owners were female. And then and then it wasn't just like a divide between like men and women, all age groups as well. So in 2010, Nintendo reported that 46% of the US population aged 6 to 74 used a Nintendo system that year.
Wait, give me those ages.
6 to 74.
Okay.
And 46%, so almost half of the US population in 2010 in that age range used a Nintendo system.
But you are expressing an enormous age range, right?
It is an enormous age range, but that's the point,
okay,
right?
Yes.
The point is that the Nintendo DS audience and the Wii audience in the spectrum of ages of people that were engaging with this was huge, and then the bottom fell out of that with the Wii U,
right?
Of
course.
Like because that like older age range, everybody migrated to their phone. Like Nintendo had to find a whole new audience. But for that brief, really just like 6-year period, Nintendo just like opened the doors to gaming for so many
everyone.
people.
Yeah. Well, and like we've talked about it before, but like it's obviously like this bridge device for older people or for female gamers that had previously not felt as though they were being marketed to. They weren't. But like it was also something that like between the DS and the Wii got me back into gaming. So like it is sort of like, and I'm like a hardcore sort of game guy. I don't know if that's true, but I guess I am. I think about video games a lot. And it's just weird to think that the Blue Ocean strategy, which is reaching out to audiences that aren't the typical audience, can also reach me, the typical audience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great X for crossover.
Which leads me to my Y. And my Y is Yoshi Touch and Go.
Okay, so we've done it now. This is
Did we do it on Y?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
We did it on Y.
Okay. We've talked a lot about Nintendo DS games that are amazing, and we've talked a lot about Nintendo DS games that did really like innovative things,
but are confounding.
And we're like amazing or really good, and not to totally, I don't know what your take on Yoshi Touch and Go is, but not to like totally disregard it as a game. But the early days of the Nintendo DS were not all like fun and games.
Oh, I come not to honor Yoshi Touch and Go, but to bury it.
So Yoshi Touch and Go was, I would say, like in the release window of the Nintendo DS, especially in Japan. So it was released in February of 2005 in Japan, and I think like March of 2005 in the US. And it feels like a tech demo that was turned into a game.
Yeah, and it probably was, right? Because it is a game where the sole input is via the touch screen.
Mhm.
Um, and there are sort of like alternating stages where Baby Mario is falling from the sky. And you can draw little like clouds onto the screen that sort of like guide his path as he's falling, and you kind of like block Shy Guys from like getting to him. No direct control over Mario himself. And then the other levels, he's on Yoshi's back, and and Yoshi just keeps walking to the right, and you have to like draw platforms for Yoshi. And again, just sort of like you know, you can like draw circles around like coins, and then you collect the coins, or you can cordon off the Shy Guys into like little areas so they won't bother Yoshi as he continues walking on his path. No direct control again of Yoshi.
Yeah. And I bought this game. I and but really, like, in the early days of the Nintendo DS, it was slim pickings.
Yeah.
There were a lot of mini game collections. There were a lot of like these sorts of things that just didn't really feel like fully formed games. Um but in the next couple of years, the software situation would change completely.
Yeah, yep. It just took a little while. This is one where I'm like, why didn't they? Why isn't this part of the like phone game model?
Yeah.
Because it was completely touch based.
Right.
Um, like this and Kirby Mass Attack. Like it seems like they could have been kind of like easy fits. And like if you're paying like $2 for a Yoshi Touch and Go on your phone, like I'd mess around with that.
I mean, I really think it's because, well, Nintendo held their nose and did mobile gaming
You're right.
because they had to.
Right.
But then as soon as the Switch became a hit and they've had the, like,
Right.
success in other areas, they've just dropped it completely. They
Right.
just don't care.
Yeah, they were like, people are buying how many copies of Mario Kart 8? I guess we don't have to do anything.
Yep.
All right, so which brings us to Z. Mark, I would like you to go first on Z's.
Okay, my Z is for Zelda.
Yeah, which one?
Both.
I'm
Is that a
I'm
cheat?
gonna need you to pick one.
Okay, I'll say Phantom Hourglass then.
Okay, because my Z is whichever Zelda Mark doesn't pick.
Okay.
So let's talk about them both.
Yeah, let's talk about The Legend of Zelda, Phantom Hourglass, and The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks.
Mhm.
Two Nintendo DS games following, I think, like, actually, like, direct sequels to um, Wind Waker, but nonetheless have that, like, Toon Link aesthetic.
Which I think that is the like most notable part is that with rare exceptions, the Zelda games don't really like repeat art styles between games, and certainly not between games across systems.
Yeah.
And so like this pair of Zelda games that just like borrowed the aesthetic from Wind Waker, then also shared a input method where you were not really directly controlling Link. You sort of are, but not really. Um, the emphasis on the touch controls is so fascinating.
It is fascinating. And I would say, like, divisive.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if for my money, bad. Like I like both of those games, but I would like them more if I could just move Link around.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's been a long time since I played
Yeah.
either of them. And I would love to revisit them in the future. Because once it's been, like 20 years since you played something,
Right.
can you really say that you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
whatever thoughts you had about it, like a different human being had
Yeah.
those thoughts. Yeah.
But I remember being totally fine with the controls in both Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. I really love Phantom Hourglass. I think it's a really fun game. I think that there had been handheld, maybe not to the degree that New Super Mario Brothers felt like a earthquake.
Yeah.
When it was announced, but there had been handheld Zelda games, like original handheld Zelda games in
Totally.
the past. But something about it being
Good ones too.
yeah, but something about it being in that like Toon Link style with like 3D sprites,
Yeah.
it felt like and with a whole new control scheme, it just felt like something really
Yeah.
new and interesting, and I think it was. And I'm always fascinated. I think, both always fascinated by these evolutionary dead ends that Nintendo
100%,
takes,
yes.
and I feel like these
and
DS games
and Nintendo duologies too. These
Yes.
things where like Nintendo does something twice and they're like, well, okay, we're done with that.
Yeah, because there's not really a reason you couldn't have got one of these on the Nintendo 3DS.
Right.
They just didn't
They
want
just
to.
didn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but bizarre stuff. And like they're also just like conceptually innovative. That like tower that you have to keep returning to in
The Temple of the Ocean King.
Temple of the Ocean King in Phantom Hourglass is like a twist on the Zelda formula that we've not seen again since. And like it's Spirit Tracks, the whole like navigating the world via train. Again, it's another love it or hate it situation, but is totally unique, and they've never done it like that since.
Yeah.
And also these games give us Linnebeck, one of the like coolest additions to the Zelda canon as far as like sidekick characters goes. Like he's up there with Midna, right? Where you're just like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that what the Zelda series was missing was a Han Solo, but it was, and we get him in the form of Linnebeck.
And, with the Skyward Sword HD having a control scheme that doesn't require motion controls, that it feels, that gives me a glimmer of hope that we will see these games in some form again in the future, like a remake or something. But I do think that if it completely loses the touch controls, maybe it will make for a better game. Like maybe it will make, but I think
that feels tough though.
I think you'll lose something that made these games really special.
Yeah, I mean, if for no other reason, there's so many like puzzles and stuff where you're using that boomerang and you got to like chart out its path by like drawing it on the screen.
And even like probably like the most famous puzzle out of Phantom Hourglass requires you to close your DS so that way something that was on the top screen can make an impression on the bottom screen. And that's like so fun. And like how do you replicate something like that?
Yeah, you just push the button and then it does it. Which is really all you're doing is like pushing a button, but there's like that little bit of extra immersion, which is just like really fun and novel. It's weird that there were like two big Zelda games on this thing. Like the 3DS did have two Zelda games, right, in the form of Link Between Worlds and Triforce Heroes, but Triforce Heroes obviously comes with like a little bit of an asterisk. It's just like the 3D or the DS pulled it off. They got like two complete unique Zelda adventures.
Yep.
All right, so that is our ABCs of the Nintendo DS. Mark, let's close this out. A little pause there on the music. I hit the button, it didn't happen, and then I didn't want to like say anything in case it was gonna, and then it did. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Thank you so much for listening. Want to give a special thank you to all of our 16-bit patrons, Connor McCabe, Patrice Millette, David Hendley, Alias X, and Kyle Seaborn. We appreciate you, and we appreciate everyone who's contributing over on the Patreon, and to everyone who is listening right now. Thank you so much. You can join our Discord. All you gotta do is email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com, and we will send you an invitation. Anthony DeLuca made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying thank you for listening.